Morning, everybody. We are going to reconvene, and I am going to introduce to you Dan Davis. Dan is a graduate of Belmont University, and he has his Master's of Divinity from Southern Seminary. He currently is tell me if I've got this right, Dan. He's currently the director of Camp Rockmont and is the founder and lead mentor of Animate Ministry. Dan, we are so glad you are here with us, and we are going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with everybody. Wow, what a good group. Exciting to see everybody tuning in. And it's no surprise, anything parenting, we tend to show up because it is such a rich and real and vulnerable time for us. And so glad to see everybody here. A couple of corrections, actually. I'm no longer director, which is great. So I've been in my own transition. About 2 years ago, I transitioned out of that. And this is a good segue. In my work, I had almost, 3.5 decades of working in Christian camping and summer camping. And that's the call I felt out of seminary, was the developmental process. And as I continued on in my role in that direction and working with, hundreds of families each year. And as the young men that I mentored back in the 80s and 90s, well, of course, these were fathers and folks in their careers. And so the questions and the predicaments and the transitions became very, very different as they grew. And my interest in that grew. And so I transitioned out of the camping world, with the exception of running some father-son programs a couple of years ago, and do full-time mentoring work. It's Animate Mentoring. I work with men and fathers, and aging from 20 to 75 currently. Actually, that's not, we had a letter retreat where we had a 92-year-old on it. So wherever folks want to walk and are in transition, that's what I do. I also work with a number of families who have adolescents and work in the initiatory process. And that's what we'll be speaking on today, is this initiatory process of adolescence, its importance, how we can kind of miss it, and how we as parents go deep in that process. My own experience with it personally, I'm married. Karen and I have been married, it'll be 33 years. In December. We have two young adults now. I have a almost 25-year-old who's fully adulted, and I have a 22-year-old who's a senior in college, and will transition into full-time paying her own bills in just a number of months. Hallelujah. And so that's where I am with my kind of personal experience, along with walking with these families. So I always start, and where I hope we can, my work is much less lecture and much more relational. And so I'm going to bring us into a couple of questions, and you can put it in the chat bar, or you can just, if you want to just show up and say it, that would be helpful too. And if you would just trust the process. The subject for today was how we walk with our kids during times of transition. The reason why I think that's important is I watch so many times, because of the way we get hooked and get bumped out, how we become adversaries with our adolescents. And that's natural. It's also not helpful. And so the other thing that's happening alongside for most of us is, while our young folks are navigating their adolescence, this real natural transitional and initiatory part of life, we are adults. Most of us are being called into the second half of our journey, and that is not natural, and it's really hard. Different than puberty and, oh my gosh, hair's growing and we're changing and our voice is changing. What we get in our call to our second half of our life journey is typically it's very awkward. We don't know what to do. We don't know if we have the tools for the next half of the journey. It comes with a lot of angst. It typically comes with a lot of resistance. Over the course of the last several generations, there have not been a lot of guides to guide us into the second half of our life journey. And so what we typically do is, because it's awkward, we double down on a couple of areas. Most of us double down on our parenting. And we get obsessed with parenting, we get over-attached, or we over-attach to our work. there's a stereotypical here where you see men over-attached to work and sometimes the moms and women over-attached to parenting. I find that that can be the case, but it's very fluid. We pick whatever is, we think, what I call the most noble distraction. And so instead of doing our own work, we have these noble distractions. And just for a quick pull aside, a noble distraction is parenting. I think maybe the most royal of the noble distractions. Oh, here we go. Church committee work. Churches are really good at noble distractions. Our own work. And then you can get to some more playful ones, sporting events and all kinds of things. Our kids' sporting events. How many of us parents? I raised a serious club soccer athlete, and man, was I over attached to that. So my wallet and my heart. And so it was really good news when Micah aged out of that and went on to college. So with that, here's my question I want to open with. And that is, actually, first, in all my work, I open with this. So I hope that you'll be willing to do this. I would love to hear just a couple of gratitudes. And so if somebody be willing to speak what you're grateful for right now, or write it in the chat bar. When we're not grateful, I feel like we're really behind the learning curve. And so would anybody be willing to just speak a gratitude?
Dan, I feel like, first of all, you've been speaking to me this entire time directly. I know it's for the larger group, but we have similar age kids and similar life stage. So my gratitude for this morning is my children live in Florida. I'm in Dallas, Texas. But my 21-year-old son texted me and asked me for the pastor's phone number. And then I immediately went into high alert, like, what's wrong? Right. And he said, oh, I just want to take my car and have a trunk at the trunk or treat on Friday, and I don't know how to sign up. And I thought to myself, okay, we have moved into a different stage. So I am grateful that fingers crossed, that we stay in this stage and that we have moved into a different stage.
Excellent. Who else would share gratitude? Thank you so much. Oh, okay. I see Anna. Grateful for, let me get to that table. Grateful for the changes of seasons and the beautiful fall in North Carolina. That's where I live. I happen to be in Nashville today, but gosh, it is a really gorgeous fall. A couple more gratitudes. This will rightly shape us.
Grateful for supportive colleagues.
Excellent. And one more.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the health and well-being of my family and children.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. One of the things we'll be talking about with the gratitude is, if you haven't yet developed a practice to sustain what I would call your clarity of purpose, you have to. It doesn't just happen. We don't just fall into it. There's no, I happen to be an avid reader, and I'm always telling the folks I work with, the truth is not in the next book. Darn it. If it would, we could just read one Brene Brown book and we would be good to go. But it takes a lot of our own work. Okay, here is the next question I want to navigate into. And by the way, I should tell you, in the way I work, we will have very clear takeaways. So if you're going, oh my, when are we going to get to the point? It's all the point. So trust the process, but we will have some specific takeaways in how we navigate with our young folks. I would be curious, Shannon, you answered, where are most of us on this call in our parenting, whether it's grandparents or are we raising adolescents? If somebody could chat in or just holler it out, where are we in our parenting journey? Thank you, Sam. Shannon, thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. Love it. Lots of boys. That's my kind of expertise. Holy smokes, Amy, God bless you. 10, 13, and 15-year-old boys. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. The reason I say excellent is there are two of the biggest transitional times in our life, and we've signed up for this, marriage and parenthood. I don't know of any two more transitional invitations than those two things. It changes us, it challenges us, it hurts us, it grows us, hopefully. And so thanks for being in that. Okay, so here's the next question. And think about this a second, and I'll share my story while you're pondering this. And that is, what were the most powerful times in your adolescence? So one or two times that were game changers for you when you were sometime between 13 and 18, or when you left home. Back when I was growing up at 18, everybody left home, either for a job or for education. But you got out of the house at 18, that has really shifted. My kids left and came back with COVID. And so we had two tries at empty nest. And I will say, interestingly enough, I was so ready for the first empty nest tribe. It was just, that's the way we'd always raised our kids. We were geared up for that. You know, the lessons were always about, okay, you're going to, tackle the world yourself at 18. They came back home. It was much harder for me to say goodbye the second time. Really hard. And so it was interesting. I don't know if anybody else with kids our age experienced that, but it was a real different energy. So when you think back to what were your journeys when you were 13 to 16, and I'm sure on this call, folks are aware of, that is this incredible brain build. That age is just, your brain is so expanding, and it's so important that during that time you get this courageous, heroic vision of your life, and bigger than just making grades or going to church or being good at whatever, but this sense of you've moved into developmentally this is very simplified, but there are three really important vital stages. The first one is just me. And that's where everything is centered around you. Makes sense. You're a baby. You need to be fed. The second stage is we are. So you get the sense of, doggone it, there are 7.5 billion other people on the planet. How do I navigate? The goal is not independence in my mind, it's interdependence. And so you go from just me, and then hopefully you move into we are. That's a lot of stage. Everybody on this call should be kind of leaning into I am, and that sense of, all right, I have some clarity on why I'm on this planet, why God has called me to this. That shifts too, but we should be in the questions of what is, not only you've identified your unique gift, but you are identifying ways to get that out, who you're going to collaborate with, and how you're going to share that to the best of your ability with the time you have left. So here we are raising these kids who are excited and are disappointed with this idea of we are. It is not all about me. We call this the 5 truths of manhood. By the way, since I work with men, you're going to hear that. It's not different for women too. It's just kind of the way I talk. And so those 5 truths are, I think this may be worth noting. The first one is life is hard. And so there is this challenge to life. What a young person will think is that when you tell them that life is hard, and I've told so many 16-year-olds this, they will think, oh, well, I thought it was supposed to be fun, because they have not been really entered into, they have dualistic thinking. And so paradox is beguiling to them. So the first one is life is hard, and that's okay. You don't need to shame or blame. It's just, you got to study to pass chemistry. You're going to fail at some of your jobs. You're not going to get it all right. Your heart's going to get broken. That is part of the process. Life is hard. The second one is you're not that important. Again, there's all these other people on the planet. The third one is your life is not about you, but you are about life. Very different way to think about things. Your life is not about you. You are about life. The fourth, and I think kind of universally the toughest, it certainly is the toughest, I think, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, is you are not in control. And no amount of money is going to give you that extra control, or the perfect relationship, which of course doesn't exist. no amount of education or no amount of diplomas on the walls. It is, you're not in control. And so you have to form this partnership. And then the fifth truth is you are going to die. Now that's sobering at any age, but you can imagine teaching that to a 16-year-old. The greater truth I would draw you into is that it's not that we have no idea whether life is long or short. None of us know if we have the rest of this day. What we can move into is that life is sacred. And so we stay as present as we can during this hour together. And when we're with our child or when we're with our spouse. So life is sacred is the takeaway from that. So the meaningful parts of my adolescence there was some church involved that was very meaningful. I'm a pastor's kid, so I spent a lot of time in the church. And I'm one of those that totally bought into it. It was really important to me. And I was not the prodigal son. I was the older brother. And man, there's a lot of pain associated with that. But I was definitely the older brother trying to get it right. And yet the most powerful times in my adolescence were not at the church. They were more on the ball field and more relationally. And so I'm curious if a couple would share what the when I asked the question of what were the powerful time of your adolescence, if somebody would put that down in there, whether it was a sports team or friendships or church, whatever those times were. Okay, I've got one. Work. Oh, that's true. Boy, I worked the whole time. I was a Chick-fil-A guy all through college. I was Chick-fil-A before it was our pleasure. You just went to work and served good chicken. That's more recent branding. Church, school, going to college, realizing my voice and had power. Youth groups, trips, friends. Cross-country team. I love the forcing. Okay, here's the next question. Thank you for that. How much of those significant times were your parents a part of? As far as your powerful time in those adolescent times, what role did your parents play? Well, I don't know if everybody's reading the chats like I am, but the answer is not surprising. I'm always prepared with these questions to be surprised and going, oops, we're gonna have to go in a different direction. That is not the case today. It's typical that in our transitional moments in our lives, it is not parent-led. Now, everybody get a tissue out, wipe your eyes, bummer. It's actually really good news. And I was close to my family in that I was the youngest of four. And so in so many ways, my parents had kind of parented. It's like, and again, I wasn't a rebel, so didn't need that much. So supportive, yes, but relational we didn't talk about many important things. As I look back, again, I've cared for my parents for the last 15 years, 95 and 96. So I have a deep relationship with them. But during those adolescent days, they were not the ones who were the most important part of my growth. And where I want to, the point I want to make is this. We as parents are not, traditionally are not the initiators. We are the launching pads. We have a role of keeping them fed. We have the role of modeling what we believe is much more important than what we say. And so as much as we want to think that we're the reason they made an A in chemistry, and a lot of us when we overattach feel sad when they flunk chemistry because they think it's about us. It's not. You didn't flunk chemistry. My son and I would talk every year before his soccer season, and we would have this conversation of, Micah, I'm not going to lose any soccer games this year. I'm not going to score any goals. I'm not going to win a state championship. I'm just your dad. Sometimes it's going to look like I don't understand that. let's make sure we circle back and realize my role. I'm just your papa. I'm not your teammate on this team. Same thing with our kids' endeavors in the classroom. Now, here's where I'm going with this point, is that the most important, I think, step number one in your work as a parent is doing your own work and being responsible for your own growth. One of the exercises I do early on with men that I work with is within the first month, we do this exercise called Realms of Responsibility. And the men list, and when I'm working with families, the moms list this as well, the men and the women. What are the places where you have to be responsible every day? This is, in a week's time, these people are counting on you. You can imagine the list. Parenting, if you're married, relationship as a spouse, their work. They may be a business owner and feel responsible for their employees. They're on a board. Church is often on the list. They're on a committee at church. You also get in the list if you care for parents, you're a son or a daughter, you're a brother or sister. Most folks will come up a list of a dozen. Ends up being.
You were frozen. Can you repeat that sentence?
Yes. Am I back on? Okay. Thanks. I'm working out of the Nashville Public Library today. So thank God for libraries. I was saying that in the realms of responsibility, the one that often gets missed, and I mean, not often, most of the time, is folks don't say responsibility for their own growth, for their own faith, for their own emotional well-being, for their own physical health, for their own spiritual well-being. Now, you can imagine when that doesn't make the list, a lot of the others, which are important, become more of a fool's errand than being right action, because you're neglecting your own work, which is more difficult, which is takes more responsibility. And so a lot of where I'm bringing parents into the conversation is I find that parenting can be the most effective when our kids see us as parents, but also as fellow travelers. And so while your son or daughter is navigating middle school or high school, for them to be very aware of, great, for a parent to be able to vocalize, all right, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to encourage you. And your mom and your dad, your father and your mother are also navigating their growth journey. And it looks like this. One of the things I found very powerful in this adolescent age with parents is them being able to communicate not only what life was like for them when they were 16, 17, 18. My wife has been, Karen, has been a real leader. She's very good at getting to the depths of things and getting to what's real. If any of you Enneagram folks out there, I am a 7, a card-carrying member of the 7 Association. And so I like to be in what's fun and what's real, which is often, tough and painful. Well, we 7s are good at navigating around that. Thanks be to God for 7s. Karen can get at the heart of things. And so early on in our marriage, I realized, she is going to be a good guide in us being really real and really honest with our kids. It was an absolute shift when we started telling them about what we were navigating, what was real to us, what our commitments were, the things we committed to, and where we failed. And so with the title today of that shared journey, that's why I brought that up. Our kids changed before our eyes as they knew that we had our struggles too. Now, it wasn't like they were our mentors or they were, we were very careful with our boundaries. We didn't bring our marital stuff to them. They saw us struggle. One of our classic stories, my son, who can avoid conflict, especially in his youth. We were having a pretty good argument at the table, Karen and I. Something had gotten sideways. We were both bumped out, entranced, whatever language. It wasn't the best of night at the table. And so we're in it pretty good. My son gets our attention. He must have been 14 or 15. He said, may I be excused? That was key for, can you stop the pain, please? Well, fortunately, his taking right action woke us up. That's what we needed to come out of our trance, out of our being bumped out. That brought us into a conversation of, number one, we said, no, Mikey, you can't. This is one of the ways your mom and I love each other, and this is the one of the way marriage looks like. And so thank you for asking to be excused. Let's work through this. You might be able to get some insight. Again, the energy so radically shifted, but it was easier for us to navigate home life and his journey after that. So being clear, being honest was really important, and that changed things. I will say too, after that, we became more honest with sharing what life was like for us. And during those years, we started talking about what our relationships were like in high school. We talked about how we did grades. Karen was a great student. I got by. And we were in a conversation with our kids in a different way as parents and as co-collaborators. I am curious. Let me look at the text real quick. Okay, so next question. So we've identified we have some adolescents and some young adults that we are navigating with. We identified that, to be honest, our parents were not the change makers in our lives. They were the one who set us up for change and for good, healthy growth. It's also what the church does too, sets us up for good spiritual growth. It doesn't have all the answers, has commitments that allow us to be on a growth journey. The next question is this: what is, for us as parents, wherever you are, what is your central fear? Most of us navigate from a central fear, concern, whatever language that you want to put around that. What is your central fear as far as your parenting? Please put that in the chat.
We're supposed to narrow it down to one.
Have fun, Michelle. Put whatever you want. Yep, narrow that down. And also, I noticed the other titles of the engagement today, which I really appreciate. Anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. It's just amazing. And where we're going is to, there we go. Ooh, thank you, Amanda. Boy. A couple more if you can. There we go. Okay, here's what I'm seeing. Shame that our kids will make rash, life-altering decisions. Ooh. Safety, staying relevant to them. And that I'm not parenting as well as I would like to. Absolutely. Adele, can I encourage you to suss that out a little bit more and be more specific about safety? I can make some assumptions, but I would love to be more specific.
I'll take it off mute so I'm not typing. I was just saying there's so many new threats and, scary situations in the world today. I mean, there always have been, but and now with our children, dealing with things that we didn't deal with, and just the world in general is just a scary place.
Do you, Adele, if I stay with you a little bit, do you think of that as very different from when we grew up?
Not very different. I mean, I talk about this with my family a lot. Like, there's always been scary stuff, but everything is just so much more visible and prevalent and in your face that it seems more relevant now. But there's just we dealt with it in different ways, but there's not the same ways that we did growing up.
Thank you very much. And if I can, Mike, if I can draw you out, if you wouldn't mind sharing, can you be more specific or say more about staying relevant to them?
I probably have more gray hair than all of you put together. I'm on grandchildren. And sometimes the discussion is about things or people or events that are very new to me. I will tell you that my to-do list includes going to see the Taylor Swift movie, and being able to converse with them so that they will tell me, hopefully, if something isn't right, or I can understand if something is bothering them and try and tell them that their feelings are relevant, but that they can make it through this. So that's what I mean by staying relevant, being able to converse.
Thank you, Mike. That's very helpful. And I just one of these two really classic ones that I want to draw attention to is Amanda, the shame. We tend to, whatever our way in the world as adults, either pass on to our kids shame or blame as the go-to when things get rough. I screwed up, or it's somebody else's fault. You know, those are, you can see where those lead as far as also to ways in the world that don't work. And then Kim drawing out addiction of any form. And absolutely, gosh, it is young folks. And I will say that I think a different, and Adele talking about, is it a safer world? There's just so much more access for access for our young folks. It was, I don't know if it was a safer world, but it was, I think, a little bit clearer when we were growing up. I say we, I'm a child of the 60s, 70s. Yeah, thank you for all those fears. Now, let me switch us to this, because, you know, what do we do when we go to fear? We need to go to clarity. And I will say in my work, it all starts with clarity, commitment, and courage. Clarity of kind of where we're navigating the world. What are the commitments we're going to need to navigate that? And then the courage to do it. Change is unbelievably hard, and it's why most of us don't. And it's why it's so important that we need friendships and accountability. So I am, if everybody would do this, just give me 2 core commitments. And for example, that you're trying to live by. So it may be honesty and courage. It could be organization and compassion. But if whoever's willing would just, you know, if your child asks you, hey, mom, hey, dad, what are your core commitments? What do you really believe in? What are 2 core commitments that you're trying to live out each day? So take a minute and then put those in the chat. Let's get a few more. Thank you so much. Sam, are you okay if I put you on the spot? Thank you so much. So by the way, all of these are, if you put them down, they're correct. And so it's you know, with anything like this, we go, oh, shoot, they had a better core commitment than me. Oh, man, don't fall for that. That's yeah, that's an old story working well. So Sam put down, be present and available. How do you, number one, how old are your kids? Do they know that? And how do you try to live that out?
I think so. My oldest will be 17 in a few weeks. My middle child will be 14, and then I've got a 10-and-a-half-year-old. I think they know that. I think that they see that I'm making an effort to be, you know, at their activities at home as often as possible. That I am a present participant in the things that they're involved with. That I don't just leave kind of the parenting things up to my wife, who is present in the house more than I am. And then just the available thing is, and this is probably something that I need to make sure that they're more aware of, but just be approachable, be available to be someone to talk to ask questions, to be vulnerable with, and also to learn, not them learn from me, but me learn from them.
What a gift that is. One more question, since you put yourself on the hook here. How has that been with the 17-year-old as you be present and he's in this, he's in his own sort? Because by design, and this is really good for us to know, our adolescents are supposed to be pushing at the boundaries. That is one of them being responsible means they're rejecting what you say. It's weird to hear that. But that is part of their responsibility, is to be able to go, I'm not sure if that's true, Dad. And why should we be in at 11? That is a 17-year-old being 17. So how is that navigated with them?
Yeah, I would say that we've probably experienced a lot of disaster. I mean, small little explosions here and there. She's very strong-willed, and in that way she takes after me. I would say that probably we don't necessarily have the in-person conversations often lead to frustration. The follow-up text message that I will send her is often where we get I know I'm just tired, or I know I'm just stressed, I know I'm just anxious, I know whatever. And so I think it has to be a both and. So for us anyhow.
I think everybody on the phone is energetically nodding. And so thank you for that. And you do bring up such an important thing, and that is the circle back, and being able to give somebody another chance to get that right. We're so bumped out so often that being able to go, wow, that didn't go well, and think that, okay, well, there it is. You've written the book, to be able to go back, wow, that was an interesting part of that chapter. I wonder what else can come out of that, and giving her another chance, giving ourselves another chance.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I would love to put, if you're willing, Kim, can I put you on the spot?
Absolutely.
Kim, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Honest communication and showing grace. Here's where I want to go. Showing that grace. Part of parenthood is holding boundaries. It's absolutely a necessity to give our kids a good container. And so it means we're going to anger them a lot, usually. How does that show up in showing grace, or what do you mean by that? How do you live that out?
Well, I guess showing grace is, I have a 17-year-old daughter who really is so amazing, but every now and then she just loses her mind. And it pushes me to lose my mind. Like, she just knows exactly what to say. And I, in turn, also know what to say. And really showing grace is recognizing for me that she's under stresses that I don't understand. And also trying to explain to her, to show grace to me, that I'm not just sitting at home waiting to do whatever she needs me to do. And so it's really also about maybe pointing out when something goes wrong in her life, that person or that teacher maybe had something else going on, maybe just, and that goes with the validation. I think sometimes she just wants validation, but sometimes I might say, like, well, we don't really know what kind of morning that teacher had, which I think can be really annoying. So it's a hard balance. But I guess just being honest with her about, that it's not always about her relationship with someone. It can be about outside things. And being vulnerable with if I make a mistake, or if I maybe jump to a conclusion that's not accurate.
Thank you, Kim. That was so well said. And I mean, we could do a weekend retreat in just unpacking what you just said. And so thank you for that invitation. It's also like you and Sam, I raised, still is a very fierce daughter. And from an early age, Karen and I would scratch our head and go, God, what are we going to do with this? The last thing we want is her losing her fierceness. and she is driving us out of our mind. And so I will say now at 22, she's a very good teacher for me as we kind of navigate adult spaces. She's an excellent teacher for me. And so that's a really good balance. And I think you pointed out a really good point on how being able to have the room to do that honest communication, that's a way of showing grace. Sam, you're circling back, another way of being able to show grace. So I knew this would happen. Our time, well, just trust that the time is what it is. So let me give you what I think are some take homes for our conversation. The first one is to make sure you get clear on what your work is, what your growth is. And that really does need to be the priority. It's, here's a cliche of the day. You got to put your own oxygen mask on first. It's absolutely true. Also, I do a lot of wilderness work, and the first thing you do as a rescuer is make sure you don't create another victim. And so what is hurting them? Let's make sure I navigate from a way that is going to keep me safe as well. So do your own work, and I'll put that in the 3 C's. Get clear, get clear on what you're doing, know what your commitments are, and be courageous in following those out. It is so easy to parent from a place of, gosh, I just want a relaxed evening. I did a lot of that. I let a lot of things go just because I wanted 3 hours of niceties and going to sleep. So thank God for Netflix. But Netflix is not going to do great work in your parenting. So just be aware of that. That needs to be part of the story. It does not need to be the theme that your family has seen Breaking Bad 5 times. There we go. So that's the first one. Be responsible for your own growth. The second one is, as far as a take home, is do tell your own stories. Instead of saying don't drink, don't smoke, to be able to go, hey, here's why I came to that belief. Here's what happened when I drank too much. Karen led me kicking and screaming into that conversation. I just wanted to disappear. Being a Harry Potter fan, I would just wish I could apparate to somebody else. And so, but it so changed, and that our kids saw us as honest. Here's what happened, when we drank too much in college. It didn't turn out well. And so that's why we encourage you not to be sloppy in that way. It's a vulnerability. Again, this was a kid when our young folks were older teenagers. And so the story was more relevant, but tell your own stories. The third thing is, whatever imagine if I interviewed everybody in here, we would be either heavy on our fierceness. That would be one of our skills, that we're very fierce, or that we're really good at gentleness. You can really meet your child where you are. You have a hard time being more clear about a curfew. Or if you're like me, man, was I clear on curfews and that sort of stuff? And to be able to balance the two, our kids need both of those, and they really do need gentleness. And by gentleness, I do not mean letting things go. Gentle is not whatever. Gentle is clear and kind and graceful. That's where that showing grace shows up. So make sure you're having some really healthy gentleness along with your fierceness. Both are vital. The fourth is, and I'm finding this more and more with the men I work with and the families I work with, that we are good at rigid, we are not great at creativity. And I see just during these anxious times that, again, it is a dance much more than this march. And so I just am compelled it is showing up so much in my work and the parents I work with. The Quakers have a wonderful concept of the third way. And we got to practice this a lot in our family. And Karen and I practice in our marriage. Okay, here's where you stand on an issue. Here's where I stand on an issue. Wonder if we can get creative about a third way. And it may be just a way of talking about it. Several times for our kids, it meant instead of curfew being 12, we just got creative and it got to be 12:15. But wherever we could have some creativity. So we've been created by a creator God. Don't be resistant to creative problem solving. It shows a real nimble mind. It's also a way to get over our hurts that we're constantly navigating. Don't burden our kids with our hurts. So creativity. And then the other thing to remember whether it's, where I am with my young adults or where you are with your 10-year-olds, that these are chapters, these are seasons in this big part of a life. And so just realizing, okay, this is a demanding season. Do you have to learn new things and new chapters of your life? You absolutely do. One of the things I'm finding, Karen and I are in our 4th decade of marriage. We're having to learn brand new skills. The skills we had in our first decade of marriage have run their course. Those cute things I used to say are no longer cute. And so that's true with parenting too. If you think, boy, do I have to learn new skills as my daughter turns 17? You do. Absolutely. And so that draws us into a humbleness. I think, especially if you have friendships and you have folks that you can, this is where the church is so valuable. You have a chance at not being alone. We are called to do this in community. So there's your 5 take homes. I think that takes us right to our time. Michelle, or Shannon, any closing questions or insights?
That's what I was going to ask. Does anybody have any questions for Dan?
Since you work with young men, what's the hardest thing they're facing in the struggle for them today?
For young men or old men? Sorry.
For our teenagers.
I think, thank you, for our teenage guys, it is how to get clear on what masculinity means. And to be able to, and it means a lot of things, but what, the images we get through social media are not the masculinity that's going to bring them any joy or any, as Nowen would say, will not lead them to their true self. And so that's where it's so important that they have men and women guiding them. The feminine is just as important as the masculine to teach them about masculinity. But they need to be around other men in what I call sacred spaces, doing activities. And this is not the Panthers game. Panthers game is fine, but that is not what I'm talking about.
And what about those of us, I've seen at least 2, if not 3 of us that have really fierce oldest daughters or daughters of any kind. What would you say is important for them to hear on the other hand?
Thank you, Shannon. To keep drawing them in, number one, they need to hear that wildness. Like, wildness in any of us is good news, God-given, important, and they need to start getting clear on how they're going to use that fierce energy. It is so powerful. So where I would draw them, if I was talking to your daughters or talking to my daughter, Josie, is you've been given a fierce gift. And like any gift we have, they're all tricky. They also have a flip side of the coin. And so how can you take that fierceness? And I mean, literally, just like this conversation, how can you make that and turn that into better friendships, better work, being able to navigate your gifts? Because gosh, we all know, boy, do we need fierce women in this world. And do we, men who don't know what to do with their power end up misusing it, being bitter or going down a tough road. So you start to talk about, all right, you have a great power. What are we going to do with this power? So you learn to soften it. You learn to focus it. And you find, there's so many great examples of powerful folks. Tell stories of powerful folks who have done great work with their fierceness. Most of them, it's because they fell down and failed a lot and got up on the other side. So tell the stories of Mother Teresa, Dorothy Day. I'm sure you have a neighbor down the street who's done well with their fierceness.
Right. Does anybody else have any other questions for Dan? Dan, thank you for your time. Do you have a last final thought for us?
Yes. My last final thoughts is to be able to, when you are feeling that whatever it happens to be, whether it's anxious, whether it's sad, whether it's anger, and I'll throw this out there. There's this wonderful Buddhist practice called RAIN, and the R is to recognize what you're feeling. The A is to allow it. Really good work for a 7. That's not time to distract yourself or go get some Thai food, telling my own story here, but to really experience it, recognize it, allow it, investigate it. Where does that come from? There's so much fruit from finding out where you develop these patterns. And then the end, which I'll encourage you to do again and again, is practice nurturing yourself and others. How we treat ourselves ultimately ends up how we treat others. And we are often foolish to say, no, I treat everybody else great. I'm just really hard on myself. I have not found that to be true. You find a way to get it out, and it's usually to the persons closest to you.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. I'm going to close this session with a brief prayer, and then we'll reconvene at 11 with our next speaker. Thanks again. Let us pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for this chaotic, messy life that is filled with joys and struggles, and that we get to share with one another. Help us to acknowledge who our children are. Not just for their accomplishments, but who they are at their core being. Help us to lift that up and continue to help them find their voices and use their gifts for the good of this world. We ask this in your name. Amen.